So hello, my name is Ayya Yeshe. I've been ordained as a Buddhist nun for 16 years. I'd like to offer an invitation or lay down the gauntlet to the Buddhist community to understand the situation of Western monastics and women in Tibetan Buddhism, and to open a dialogue about how things can improve for women in Buddhism. I ordained with a heart full of inspiration. My great hope was to attain liberation and to be of service to society. I didn't know that there was any difference between the Tibetan monastics I saw, who seemed very happy in India and Nepal, and the Western monastics who ordained or have been ordaining since the 1970s. Buddhism is a very fast-growing religion in many Western countries, but very few people know the value of monastic life or the situation of Western monastics. I ordained with 15 other people, and only 13 are left. In the space of 16 years, 98% of them have disrobed. And that is mostly because we don't financially support monastics. There are thousands of Tibetan Buddhist centers in the world that serve the lay Buddhist community, in the Western world, but they charge Western monastics. And this is a practice that has never happened in 2,600 years of Buddhism. The Buddha clearly said that monastics are there to preserve the Dhamma, to practice in ways that lay people don't have time to do. That's not to say that lay people can't achieve great things, but they just practice in a different way. And monastics have time to be of service to society because they don't have a full-time paid job. They're an asset to the community. Most monastics I know are incredibly busy investing in various projects. Like when I ordained, people started telling me their problems. I've done a lot of counseling. I got invitations to teach meditation in drug and alcohol rehab centers, Alcoholics Anonymous, schools, HIV hospices, and prisons. I couldn't have done this work if I was working in a lay job. And yet, on the first day I ordained, I had to take off my robes and put on lay clothes and go to work in an office in order to pay rent to the Dharma center where I was staying. And this is clearly against the Vinaya. When asked why Buddhism of previous Buddhas disappeared, the Buddha said that it was because they did not lay down a Vinaya. You know, the Vinaya is like the ship that preserves the teachings, the code of ethics for monastics and lay people. And also, if we look at the history of Buddhism, cultures that did not have an element of monastic practice, like Borobudur, the Vajrayana culture that built Borobudur, Buddhism quickly disappeared in those countries. And the Buddha created very clearly the fourfold Sangha, which is fully ordained monks and nuns and lay practitioners who are not a threat to each other, but who work together to preserve Buddhism. But what we have in the West is a whole lot of lay men and women and many lay teachers, but we're hemorrhaging Western monastics, particularly in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And the people who are disrobing are people below 45, the very people who have the most time to offer to preserve the Dhamma and to give teachings and serve society are the very people who are leaving. We have a 75% disrobing rate. So when I ordained, there was a Tibetan Lama staying at the center who everybody bought food for and who was not charged rent and who was treated with tremendous amount of respect. And I hit the glass ceiling pretty quickly when a Tibetan Lama told me that I should pray to be reborn as a man and that women will never achieve as much as men spiritually. Which is pretty ironic because women are the biggest supporters of spiritual practice. And I just wondered, it was all Asian men sitting on the throne. It was all Asian men sitting in the refuge tree on the lineage holders. And when I ask, why we have the same vows, why do you bring food to the Tibetan Lama? Why do you support the Tibetan Lama but charge Western monastics who are running your Dharma center for free? They said, why should we support you? You're just a tourist. And, we have Tibetans. We don't need Western practitioners. It would be a great shame if someone came into a Buddhist center 100 years from now and said, does anyone live like that prince who gave up a kingdom for the benefit of the many, to live in simplicity and compassion and ethics? And we said, no, sorry, we don't think anyone can live like that. We didn't think it was worth supporting. But if you want a mindfulness retreat, it's $1,000 for the weekend. There is a kind of commodification of the Dharma going on, which means that many people who need to access it can't afford to. So, this is the kind of discrimination we face. There are many monasteries that were donated by Western practitioners, especially Western nuns, that now support Tibetan lamas, but Western monastics pay money to stay in those same centers that they donated, but Tibetan lamas can stay there for free. There are 30,000 Tibetan monks and nuns approximately living in exile in India, and they now have very well-established monasteries, mostly funded by foreigners, and they do deserve support. They preserved the Dharma for 1,000 years, and they have a very rich and amazing tradition. But culture and Dharma are not the same thing. And just because someone is of a particular ethnicity does not mean they deserve support more than anyone else who has the same vows from another country. One has to question why we support teachers who refuse to support us, why we as Western women support only men and do not invest in our own Buddhist community with people from our own gender. If we are women who believe in gender equality, why are we empowering centers that charge money to Western nuns and not investing in a long-term vision to preserve Buddhism for the future? I run a charity called the Kalyana Mitra Fund, which has offered scholarships for Western monastics for 16 years. And we have done a lot of research on why Western monastics disrobe and what their situations are. And we offer them scholarships, and we're trying to raise money to build a monastery to change this situation and to also offer service to the lay community and help preserve the Dharma. I've heard stories of monastics who lived under the staircase in a Dharma center because they couldn't afford to rent a room, but the Lama, who was a Tibetan man, was living in the penthouse on the top floor. That monk in Tasmania was offering service to the community and teaching introduction to Buddhism classes. I've also heard stories of Buddhist nuns who had to live in their cars and who lay awake at night worried that they'd be attacked. I heard a story of a nun who had to sleep in the corridor of a Dharma center because she couldn't afford the money required for a retreat. So this is how we're treating Sangha, Western monastic Sangha. Recently, there was an article in a really well-known Buddhist magazine called The Future of Buddhism, and it had a whole bunch of lay Buddhist teachers. There was not one traditionally ordained celibate monastic on the front of the cover. And I just wondered, are we invisible? Will no one live like the Buddha in future? Of course not everyone's going to be called to live like a monastic, but that doesn't mean that it's not valuable, Our failure to support Western monastics is our failure to be there for each other as a community and to invest in community. And a mistaken understanding that a spiritual path is simply about ourselves and our teacher and our practice and our peace. But if you have a truly spiritual experience, you have to understand that happiness is not just a personal matter, it's a communal matter, that we are intimately connected and everything we have comes from others. This body has been provided for by our mother. The fact that we are alive is because someone else grows our food. The fact that we can read a Dharma book or sign our own name is because someone taught us to read and write. So the fourfold Sangha is intimately related, and we either sink or swim together. The Buddha predicted that when the monastic Sangha disappear, the Dharma will also disappear. And he also said that Buddhism is only flourishing in a country when there is the presence of fully ordained monastics and the fourfold Sangha is flourishing. So in Australia, we have hundreds of Tibetan Buddhist centers, but there is not one center that supports Western monastics to full-time practice and study without charging them some amount of money. And yet there are so many monastics who are running lay Dharma centers who completely burn out because they're not nourished and supported. The Buddha continuously praised generosity. He said, those who know the value of generosity as I do would not let one meal pass without having offered something. So, it's in the suttas, it's in the Sigalovada Sutta, it's in the Vinaya, that it's the responsibility of the lay community and the master who ordains a person to support them. That master who ordains them is supposed to offer food, shelter, medicine, and robes, without which monastic life is not possible. And the monastic, in turn, is supposed to offer spiritual sustenance and inspiration to the lay community. So, it's clearly written into the sutras, and the value even of a celibate tantric practitioner is said to be highly ideal for Vajrayana practice. It's written into the Guhya Samaja Tantra. So the situation that we have, where there is approximately less than 2,000 Western Tibetan Buddhist monastics in the world, and they have maybe 3 centers where they can go and study and practice without paying money. And only one of those centers is controlled autonomously by a Western nun. So we have these Western monastics devoting themselves to the community, offering so much, but having so little support in return. They neither have the freedom of lay life to have relationships and financial independence, nor do they have the benefit of having the time to be full-time contemplatives to preserve the Dharma. And it's a very sad thing that we have not this mind of building community, of offering social service. We are divided along the lines of tradition and ethnicity. And we are not working together to preserve and promote Buddhism in the long term in the West. We're still too oriented for myself, my practice, and not as a community. So if all of our archetypes and leaders are only Tibetan males, it's got to do something to our self-esteem. The reification of Tibetan culture, the ethnocentrism, is damaging. There are no role models for Western women, and if there are role models, you can count them on your hand. There's actually very few. And we have to ask ourselves, how are we playing a part in the patriarchy that exists in Buddhism and the ethnocentrism? Open a dialogue with your Dharma center. Why are you taking the money of Western women and not supporting the training of Western female teachers and Western monastics? Why are we funneling our money into projects and communities that don't support us mutually in return? Tibetans do deserve support, but we also need to have a long-term vision for Western Buddhism and Western Tibetan Buddhist monastics, which are a part of that. So, sometimes people will say, well, it's your karma. But karma is not destiny. Karma means action. You sow the seeds. If you see a bad situation, you change it. Everybody is a result of economic, cultural, and spiritual conditions. If you change the conditions, they can also change. If we had just accepted the way things were and not questioned, women wouldn't have the vote, women wouldn't own land, women wouldn't have birth control. So many good things had to be fought for, had to be protested for, had to be advocated for. So the idea of karma is not a reason to judge others or to be apathetic to dysfunction, and to not examine the internalized patriarchy we have and how we as Westerners and we as women are colluding in our own oppression. It is unwise, and it's also damaging, for our own Buddhist practice and for the future of Buddhism in general. We need to question these things, with an open heart. It's funny that what I say should seem somehow so outrageous, but really it's just common sense, that human beings are equal and that all monastics deserve the same support, and that we need to invest in the future of the Buddhist community. So, the first thing Tibetan Lamas did when they went into exile was to create monasteries, was to create places of full-time practice and study. So as well as lay Lamas who are married, they also have always, throughout thousands of years, invested in celibate monastics to hold the Dharma full-time. Even Padmasambhava said, start Samye, so those practitioners can be full-time holders of the Dharma. Many married Lamas who have full training today actually had monastic training as children, and full-time training at that, To produce a fully qualified teacher takes 15 or 20 years of full-time study and practice. So please, think about opening a dialogue with your centre and think about what you can do to create a valuable future for the fourfold community. We really need to support each other and lift each other up. And, the monastics are, an asset to us. They can help us build the fourfold Sangha in the community. They can help us to carry Buddhism forward into the future. They're a preserving, stabilizing force. They're an asset. People who follow awakening are the highest ideal of Buddhism. So why are we not supporting them? Why have we internalized this inferiority complex? So please do something for the Sangha, start asking questions, do something for the world, and hopefully we can make a difference and create a more equal, beneficial future for Tibetan Buddhism in the West. Thank you. So Kalyana Mitra Fund is a registered charity in Australia, and the website and donation facilities are available below this video. We really appreciate your donation to help us build a lasting legacy for Western women and for Western monastics in a monastery which is a few acres, which is a place where monastics can receive full-time training, keep the vinaya, and deepen their practice and gain insight and training in order to be social workers, counselors, and inspiring Buddhist leaders and go out into the world and benefit others. It's also a place where activists can come and find contemplative rest and refuel themselves to continue making a difference in the world. So thank you for your support. And if you can't offer a donation, at least spread the word by sharing our video. Thank you so much.